We've all seen the paintings. We feel like we know the story. But behind that familiar image of Jesus and his disciples at a long table, there's a moment so revolutionary it would completely change the course of history. So today, we're going to dig into Matthew 26 to really understand what happened at the Last Supper and why it was so much more than just a final meal.
We tend to think of this as an ending, don't we? A somber, final meal before everything just falls apart. But what if that's not the whole picture? What if this wasn't really an ending at all, but the carefully planned beginning of something brand new? To get just how radical this moment was, we first have to understand the ancient tradition that Jesus was about to turn completely on its head. So Jesus and his disciples weren't just having a casual dinner. They were celebrating Passover, and for centuries, this was the most important meal of the year for the Jewish people. It was this powerful annual remembrance of their freedom from slavery in Egypt. It was a story all about freedom, a story defined by the blood of a lamb.
And this right here just captures the incredible tension of that moment. Think about the irony. Jesus, who is the true Passover lamb, is taking part in the symbolic meal, the shadow, just hours before he becomes the reality that the entire tradition had been pointing to for centuries.
And you have to know, this was no accident. Not a single detail was left to chance. Just like God orchestrated that very first Passover way back when, he was orchestrating this one. So a meal that for centuries was about remembering freedom from slavery in Egypt was about to be redefined as a meal about freedom from sin itself. A huge shift.
And the first step in that redefinition, it happens with something as simple and common as a loaf of bread.
Can you just imagine being in that room? You've eaten this Passover bread your whole life. You know exactly what it symbolizes. And then Jesus just picks it up, breaks it, and says this. The shock must have been palpable. He takes this ancient symbol and connects it directly to himself.
He's completely changing the meaning. This isn't just about unleavened bread anymore. He's telling them, my own body is about to be broken, just like this bread, as the real sacrifice for you.
And he doesn't stop with the bread. Next, he does the exact same thing with the cup of wine.
And boom, another bombshell. Every single person in that room knew that blood and covenant were the absolute bedrock of their relationship with God. And that phrase, forgiveness of sins, well, that was tied to the most sacred day of their entire year. Jesus is using incredibly loaded language here.
See, he's not just tweaking the old agreement. He's instituting a new covenant. It's a brand new contract between God and people. And he's declaring that this one won't be sealed with the blood of an animal. It's going to be sealed with his own.
And this is where things get truly revolutionary. This new way completely replaces the old system of doing sacrifices over and over and over again.
When Jesus' disciples heard the words, blood poured out for forgiveness, their minds would have immediately snapped to one thing, the Day of Atonement. This was the one day a year the high priest went into the holiest place on earth to offer a sacrifice for the sins of the whole nation.
And this comparison just lays it all out so clearly. It shows the massive upgrade Jesus is announcing. The old system was temporary. It had to be repeated every single year. It involved animal blood, and it only kind of covered sin for a little while. But Jesus is declaring that his sacrifice, it's going to be final, it's going to be perfect, and it's going to be permanent.
Just one time. Not an endless annual ritual, but a single event. One time for all people, for all time. With this single act, Jesus is bringing the entire cycle of animal sacrifices to an end and replacing it with himself. So we have this perfect, divine plan unfolding, but what really makes this story so unbelievably powerful is that it's surrounded by complete and utter human failure.
Right in the middle of this history-altering moment, everything just goes wrong on a human level. Judas sells Jesus out for 30 pieces of silver, literally the going rate for a common slave. Peter, the guy who swore he'd die for Jesus, denies even knowing him 3 times. And when the soldiers show up, every single one of his closest friends, they just run. And this brings us right to the heart of it all. This chapter shows us that God's perfect plan wasn't derailed by all this human weakness, it was fulfilled through it. Jesus knew it was all going to happen, and this quote just says it perfectly. Our failures don't stop God's plan. In fact, they're often the dark background that makes his grace shine even brighter.
And that leaves us with this final thought to chew on. Peter's denial, that wasn't the end of his story. The disciples abandoning him, that wasn't the end of theirs. This whole thing shows us that a perfect plan can be accomplished through seriously imperfect people. So what if our own worst moments, our greatest failures, what if they aren't the disqualifying end we're so afraid they are? What if they're actually just setting the stage for grace?